Before the ports, before the plantations, before the vanishing, there were the Chirua, the Chana, and the Guarani. Nations of people who lived by the rivers, farmed the plains, and left their stories etched in stone and song. They were the first to resist. When Spanish ships touched these shores in the 1500s, they fought them off. But over centuries, this land, now called Argentina, would trade one silence for another. By the late 1700s, up to 60% of Buenos Aires was black. Today, less than 1%. Uruguay built its military on black militias, then wrote them out. Paraguay lost half its male population in war, black men included, and never recovered. So, what happened? This is the story of a region where black people and indigenous people were not just forgotten, they were erased on purpose. And yet, the rhythm, the food, the names, the resistance, it's all still there. Let's talk about what really happened to black people in the Rio de la Plata. Buenos Aires was a black city. In the 1700s and early 1800s, Afro-descendant people made up a massive portion of the population, up to 60% in some neighborhoods. They were soldiers, artisans, builders, drummers. Then came the Freedom of Wombs Law in 1813, a step toward abolition, but real emancipation dragged on into the mid 1800s. Free didn't mean equal. Afro Argentines received no land, no compensation, just conscription. They were drafted into war after war, especially the War of the Triple Alliance, and died in staggering numbers. The 1871 yellow fever epidemic finished what war had started. Whole communities vanished overnight. The government removed black from the census. European immigration was pushed to widen the nation. You guys all know about that blanqueamiento. Black culture was sidelined, erased, except when it could be sold back as Argentine. The myth of an all-white Argentina was born. But in the accents, the rhythms, and the faces of the people, you can still hear the ghosts. In Montevideo, slavery mirrored Argentina's, but freedom came with fewer rights. Black militias helped win independence, then they were disbanded. Black neighborhoods suffered neglect, but culture, that survived, right? Candombe, a drumming tradition born from African spiritual roots, became Uruguay's pulse. Even as Afro-Uruguayans were pushed out of visibility, they kept the drum alive in Barrioso and Palermo. Today, Afro-Uruguayans are about 8% of the population, but drastically underrepresented in power. Yet every year, during Carnival, the city remembers, because Candombe never left. It just waited in the rhythm. Paraguay had a smaller black population, but it mattered. Many were brought via Jesuit missions and colonial trade, settled around Asuncion. They lived in rural communities or served in the military. Then came the War of the Triple Alliance. Paraguay versus Brazil, Argentina, and Uruguay. It wiped out half the country's population. Up to 90% of adult men died, including many Afro-Paraguayans. The survivors were scattered, the memory erased. Today, places like Kamba Cuá hold on to their heritage, but the nation as a whole buried it. The war burned the bodies, the culture was silenced, and the silence still echoed. The Rio de la Plata isn't just a river, it's a grave, it's a witness, and it's a warning. Argentina, Uruguay, and Paraguay erased black identity through war, disease, and deliberate forgetting. But the people are still here. In the slang, in the food, in the rhythm of a candombe drum, in every street where someone asks, why doesn't this history show up in school? So, what happened to black people in the Rio de la Plata? They were enslaved, they were used, they were erased, but not forgotten because the river remembers.